And we're live from the land of eternal elections with Anouk Young from Modain, Israel. Haksam Mayak, good morning, afternoon, whatever it is there.
Yes, well, as we've adapted from the Truman Show, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening,
Okay.
depending on when our listeners are listening. Yes, the land of eternal elections. You know, it would be funny if it wasn't so sad.
That's right.
As I don't want to say predicted, because there was no need to predict, but there is, as of now, no clear decision. About 88% of the votes are counted. And understanding it's a lot more complicated than in the American style elections. And let's stay away from the presidential one, because people's heads are going to explode.
Yeah, we
But
have no clear thing either.
so when someone runs for the Senate from whatever state, there's someone who gets the majority of the votes and someone who doesn't. So there's a winner and a loser. When you are cobbling together a coalition, well, let's put it this way: 37 parties ran in the election, of which probably 13 will get into the Knesset,
Okay.
possibly more, possibly less. But it doesn't appear, even if you add up all the numbers allegedly, that Netanyahu will be able to form a government. Israelis are frighteningly simplistic when it comes to voting. Usually, they only vote on security and/or image. The image is Bibi is our strong man. I can relate to you a conversation I overheard a week ago in Machane Yehuda, in the outdoor market. Some guy was trying to argue with owners of a stall of why change needed to be in Israel. And every point that he brought up, the response from the guys who were running the stall was, Rak Bibi, only Bibi. He said, yeah, but the economy, Rak Bibi. Yes, but the way he managed the whole COVID, no, Rak Bibi. It was astounding. No one wants to hear economic plans. And actually, this election is considered by many analysts just to be yet another stalling tactic until Netanyahu finally steps down, and then there's a real race for leadership. It's pathetic.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's some kind of end time meaning and scenario to this, but I don't know what it is, honestly. All I can say,
it's probably in the book of Hezekiah.
It's in the book of Second Abigail.
Okay.
That's for sure.
Yeah, that one too. That's
the thing is, I've been an Israeli since September 2009. That means 11 and a half years. And as of yesterday, I voted in 6 national elections. Wow. 6 in 11 and a half years. And it looks like I'll be doing it again at the end of the summer, unless Netanyahu forms a coalition with, guess who? The Arab party that he's been snuggling up to. Cozy.
Yeah, and that was my question. I'm looking at a Root Sheva, and it says rightist bloc falls below 60 seats as Arab list continues threshold or clears threshold. Explain that, please.
Okay. A number of years ago, Avigdor Lieberman pushed a bill through in the Knesset, changing the minimum threshold to get a seat. Now, you have to understand, the way the 120 seats for the Knesset are determined is you take the total number of votes and you divide it by 120. So in theory, let's say for the sake of argument, let's make it really easy for me. Let's say you need 100,000 votes to get a seat in the Knesset.
Okay.
That's the way it used to be. Lieberman, in an attempt to block the smaller Arab parties, came up with a threshold of 3.25% of the vote. So 3.25% of the total number of votes will get you 4 seats in the Knesset. You cannot get 1 seat in the Knesset anymore. That's been for several elections. So if there's anyone that you know that claims that he's running in a party that he's going to get into the Knesset, no. So those 4 seats will take, here's an approximate number for you, 150,000 votes. Okay, so that's what clearing the minimum threshold means. I know it's incredibly confusing. I can imagine people watching this and heads bursting all across America in particular. The Europeans are a little more used to coalition politics. So it's a mess.
So does this mean that the Arab bloc has any real say in the Knesset?
Well, between the 2 Arab parties that are in, one is called the Joint List and one is this Ram that Netanyahu is close with. They could be the deciding factor in making a new Netanyahu government. So in theory, you would then have a quote unquote extreme right wing, the so-called religious Zionist party, which, by the way, in case y'all are wondering, I do not support. I support Naftali Bennett and Yamina, who has a sound economic plan, a religious plan, you name it.
Yeah.
That's all out. So if Netanyahu gets in, it's again the Haredi, the ultra-Orthodox parties, and things being further ossified on all levels. The economy and everything, it is a mess.
Okay.
But it's almost Pesach.
Yeah, it is. So let's spend some time talking about something important, which is Pesach. And
something real.
Yeah. So with all that's going on this year, I mean, last year was kind of very interesting in that people were literally locked down, isolated in their homes, which was the first time that had happened in centuries. So what does Pesach look like this year in Israel?
Okay. Well, you actually lead into a great point that I have to digress for a moment because it's actually a much larger issue. I have always welcomed people to write to me. I've encouraged them. I've even pleaded at times, write to me, I'm lonely.
Maytag repairman.
Yeah, but here comes the caveat. Don't be sending me stupid, moronic videos that purport to show a distorted reality in Israel between those who've been vaccinated and those not, because it's not true. Yeah. And if something changes in Israel, okay, I'll put it to you this way. If something changes in Israel, I will be the first one to rat them out. But there are no police roaming around. They are not rounding up people. They are not barring people who aren't vaccinated from buying food. It's a lie. It's a series of lies. And it makes me nuts. People that I used to think were intelligent, who were my friends, who actually have invited me to speak in their congregations years ago, they must have the IQ of a moron, because all of a sudden they're posting and they're just, it's the assumption that it must be right because it fits their agenda. So enough said about that.
Well, let me just add, there is an idea here regarding it fits your agenda. And I've seen some of that because I get forwarded the same kind of things that are sensationalism. there's a lot of sensationalism going on today, not just Israel,
Yeah.
but cyborgs and all kinds of in my opinion, crazy lunatic things, which are basically designed to make sure that you have a donor base.
Yeah.
uh, because sensationalism brings in money. Persecution and sensationalism both bring in money from people. Let's go to a couple of things. Years ago, there was going all over the internet. This is in the first stages of the internet that was being released. There was a story being released that in Gamla, the vultures, the Gibeon vultures, uh, were reproducing at such a high level that the skies were darkened because of them. Now, let me use a good Hebrew kosher word to explain this. Baloney. Wasn't happening. A couple of years ago, the number one news article for the Israeli Inquirer,
Yeah.
which is not actually named Inquirer, but it is like got Israel in the name. They reported that the Dead
Right.
Sea was turning into fresh water because there was pools along the sides that were fresh water, which was actually like caused by rain or some springs or something. I mean, but
Yeah.
you're right. I know it fit into an agenda. So people need to be careful with those things because you get emotional about something and all of a sudden you're just led right into it. Go ahead.
Because it fits into eschatology. Now, again, as you said just a few moments ago, let's talk about Pesach because it's real. Pesach, I personally have always seen as a chag, a holiday of renewal. Nisan is one of our New Year's. You know, when you think about it, if we really partied on New Year's, we've got New Year's for trees. Okay.
Yeah, like
The
5 of them, man.
Yeah, we're doing it in a big way. One thing that's always perplexed me, though, is it will technically be spring here soon.
Yeah.
And one of the names for Pesach is Chag HaAviv, the spring holiday. Ironically, outside of Israel, everything is renewed. The barren trees get leaves, there's grass again, it becomes green and lush and beautiful. Here, it's the reverse.
Yeah.
All that's green and lush and beautiful becomes brown and tan and dry.
Yeah.
So what's up with that? But Pesach is the time of our national restoration. We went down into Egypt as a family and left and reached Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, to become a nation.
Yeah.
That aspect of nationhood and belonging is deeply, sadly, and sorely missing today. We both know quite a number of people that are working fervently for that, but it seems to be like the myth of Sisyphus, pushing that boulder all the way up only to have it roll back down so you get to repeat it the next day.
Mm-hmm.
People want to sort of stir the cauldron and have a mystical incantation and have something poof like magic. It doesn't work that way.
Mm.
And you and I were just talking about this recently. We always hear that in the way that the children of Israel were redeemed in Nisan, so it will be in the future. And every Nisan, we're there, hopeful, like looking out at the horizon, are we there yet? Are we there yet? And we seem to be missing the point, because we think of the repetition, we think of the greater Exodus, we think of multitudes leaving the exile, laden with riches on our shoulders, singing like, ding dong, the witch is dead, da, 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 da. Everything is just great. But what if the element that will be in the future redemption, may it be this year, is the element that 80% of the children of Israel chose to stay behind in exile, in slavery? What if that's the element that we retain? Now, I do have way too much time on my hands, and that causes the mind to think many strange things. I wanted to bring out a couple of points about Pesach, though, that I think most people around the world are unaware of. First of all, we have a unique situation, happens every number of years, where you have Pesach starting Saturday night, right after Shabbat. So for us, all of our preparations are done. The kitchen is all set for Pesach, and we use separate dishes, separate this is like the most fanatical of staying away from anything that was ever near chametz. Chametz, what you all call leavening. And now I go off onto my pet peeve. If I see one more person ask me what it's like in Israel during the days of unleavened bread, we don't celebrate days of unleavened bread. Yeshua never celebrated the feast of unleavened bread. We celebrate Pesach. Pesach. Words do matter. And now I'm not referring to the American culture cancel nonsense, but I'm referring to get with the terminology. In the same way that if your congregation is referred to as a church, and that you go to Saturday church instead of Sunday church, trust me, boys and girls, it's a church, and Yeshua never would have stepped foot in it. Just saying. I love throwing those kind of things in. First of all, I love seeing that look of shock and horror on your face, Mike. It really, it's great. Like, what's he going to say now?
No, I'm really interested in how this whole thing of unleavened bread, because I'm probably guilty of using the terminology.
Okay. In the same way, someone wrote me the other day, what is the date of the Seder, comma, the date of Pesach, parentheses, Passover, in case I didn't understand what Pesach meant, and the days of unleavened bread? What are the dates for each of them? And I was like that robot on Lost in Space, like, danger, Will Robinson, danger. I was tilting. I wrote back, said, I don't know what you're referring to. Okay. Pesach is Chag HaMatzot, the holiday that we eat matzah. The Seder, Pesach, is the same thing. We only have one Seder. Okay, outside of Israel, Jewish community does too. But it's not a separate series of holidays. There is no separation in our world.
Okay.
Now, again, y'all may want to do it differently. You may want to call it differently. But all I can say is, in April, next month, I hit a specific anniversary in my life. People thinking, what's that? You came on Aliyah in September. What are you referring to? It was in April of 1994. So it'll be 27 years that I first met people who said to me, at United Israel World Union, I'm not Jewish, but I think I'm part of Israel. I think I'm the descendant of the tribes, what we now know as Ephraim. 27 years I've been hanging out with y'all. Yeah. Everyone's probably wondering, when is this poor boy going to get paroled? I don't know. I don't know. But the thing about it is, shortly thereafter, I got the advice to study the New Testament, because how else was I going to understand where my brothers and sisters were coming from?
Okay.
I don't expect people in the so-called Hebrew roots movement to spend nearly as much time studying Judaism and studying historically the way Yeshua lived here in the land of Israel as a Jew. I don't expect you to spend nearly the amount of time that I did. But give it at least a cursory understanding. When you write to me wishing me a good Sabbath, y'all can say Shabbat Shalom. Get with the program. I know I'm sounding like I'm a bit, that my shorts got a bit shrunk in the wash. No, it's more than that. It's the fact that by using, it's funny. Everyone I know in this walk, I love that term. Everyone I know makes fun of the King James translation. Everyone I know. But most people, not all, but most, live and die by the King James translation and its interpretation.
Yeah. So let me bring up a couple things. First of all, I'm with you on words. Okay. Brad Scott was a big one on words mean things. So was Rush Limbaugh, by the way. For me, words are very important. Working as I did for a number of years in air traffic control,
Yeah.
I mean, words are life and death in that. You don't just use something. You don't say "oh" instead of "zero." That literally changes everything. This
Yeah.
Shabbat versus Sabbath. The Muslims can have a Sabbath on Friday, and the Coptic Christians can have one on Sunday, and it's in accordance with the word. But Shabbat is Shabbat. It's only one day that is called Shabbat, and that is, that period of time that we believe to be Friday night to Saturday night. So yeah, I got that. I got all that. That doesn't mean that all of us have to know everything Hebrew. We don't have to,
No.
if I don't say Pesach, but I say Passover, that's totally different topic in my mind, at least. So yes, words mean things. When I'm around someone that's a Hebrew speaker, I try to use more Hebrew. For one thing, it sharpens me, and for another, it's just kind of showing a little bit more respect. A mutual friend of ours, my original tour guide, Miriam. You don't call her Mary. I mean, it's just obvious. Okay.
Yeah.
With that being said, let's go back to this thing of Pesach, of unleavened bread, first fruits, and Shavuot. What you described, Hanok, is the Hebraic, let me call it Jewish thought process, that you have not truly observed Pesach until you have observed Shavuot. So the spring festivals, this is my understanding, please correct me, the spring festivals are to be seen as one message. So Pesach is a Seder. It's a meal, but it's, though we have that time that we have that Seder, at the end, on the 14th, leading into the 15th, there's not a real date called Pesach. It's more of a time and process of entering into something of a greater picture. Does that, did that cover
Okay,
it a little bit?
I can go with you on part of that, but
Okay.
Pesach and Shavuot are not the same thing. It's not two ends of the same coin,
No, but
except
it's
for the
continuation.
counting, of the Omer,
Yeah.
Sfirat Omer. And although people focus on the food at the Seder,
Mhm.
it actually is a reenactment of what it meant to be a slave. Now, for all of those who are, scrubbing, their kitchen to get rid of every trace of chametz, they're feeling pretty much like a slave right now. There's no doubt about it. But I also wanted to mention the there's a tremendous cultural difference between growing up on the side of the family that's maintained this for a couple of thousand years and growing up on the side of the family who had to take back that heritage that had been taken from them.
Mhm.
And I'll give you a quick example, and then I want to tie in something with, I was just told yesterday that Easter is coming up.
I guess.
I mean, it's not a thing here. If I were able to guide now, I would see that. But anyway, on Pesach, the Ashkenazi Jewish community, the Jewish community that descends from Europe, does not eat roasted lamb. Absolutely not. As close to forbidden as you can get, because it's symbolic of the eating of the Korban Pesach, the Pesach offering. So that's a different. Now, the Jews of Sephardic or Mizrahi descent, Jews who descend from Spain, Portugal, and the Muslim countries, will eat it. But again, there's a difference. I don't know if you realize, but until 2 generations ago in Europe, there were Jewish communities that only had white wine at the Seder. The reason was, so when the Christians burst into their home, they couldn't accuse them of drinking the blood of young Christian boys.
Wow. Did not
Which
know
is,
that
it's the lead in, the segue to Easter.
one. Okay,
I'm sorry.
before you go there, let me go back a little bit, just a minute. The reason this thought process of you have not celebrated Passover until you've celebrated Shavuot is this. That Pesach is about our deliverance from Mitzrayim. Shavuot is about receiving instructions that will keep us from returning back to Mitzrayim.
That's beautiful. I
Okay,
love that.
so
I
move
love
on.
that.
Move on.
No, I mean, when you think about it, we left Mitzrayim at Pesach, but we didn't become a nation until Shavuot.
Yeah.
Until we as a nation, our constitution, using an American term, is the Torah.
Yeah. Yeah. So
No, I totally agree with you.
you
But
left you left Mitzrayim as families and got to Mount Sinai and became a nation. Yeah. Okay.
I could be facetious in saying it was downhill ever since, but no. Let's not be negative. Let's not be negative.
Okay.
Um, again, talking about just barely 2 generations ago, there were Jewish communities throughout Europe that would board themselves up the night of Easter because marauding Christians, the quote unquote, the passion, Now, to me, I've always wrestled with, I heard an expression when I was a kid. Why is it that Gentiles aren't so gentle? And I've struggled with that, but it's a sense of not understanding
Yeah.
how it is that someone could feel so in love with Jesus that to show their love, they could only slaughter, rape, and pillage Jews. And it's so much, and you know, all you need to do is look at some of the news reports. I saw a video from the UK, from London, just the other day. It was a security camera footage of a guy following a pregnant Jewish woman, throwing a bag over her head and beating her. And then when you and I, in our travels and speaking and teachings, encounter Jew hatred, anti-Semitism, and anti-Jewishness, anti-Judaism from people in the very movement who claim to be working towards the restoration, it's even more frightening.
This thing of anti-Judaism, Hanok, there's one thing of disagreeing. Right? There's a lot of things in Judaism that I disagree with. So what? That doesn't mean that I need to turn that into an anger against my Jewish brothers. I mean, you guys will have some things that you do on this Passover that it's like, okay, I'm glad they're doing it, not me. But that doesn't make me right, you wrong. It just means we see
Different.
things a little bit different.
Yeah.
And I've learned that maybe if I'm not as reactionary to things, it's like, someone will say, well, since we have Passover, it's on Shabbat that, you guys are going to have Seder's late because you can't do your final preparations till after Shabbat. And someone would say, well, that's legalistic. And my response would be, well, that's judgmental. Because legalism is doing the right thing for the wrong reason, which is a judgment of the inner man. And the last time I checked, I don't have that ability.
You never got that mandate, huh? Never got that license?
No, it never has
Well,
worked out real well. So,
because the difference that we all struggle with is not one of Hebrew terminology. It's one of not understanding the basic concept of mutual respect.
yeah.
It in the sense of, I say to people all the time, I say, instead of judging, why not work together for the restoration? Bring Mashiach, bring the Messiah, get the final redemption, have the whole enchilada. And then we all get to see how it all shapes out. But people, they're not about God, and they're not willing to let God be God. They want to recreate God in their own image. And it's a serious problem.
Yeah, another golden calf. Let me wade into something that I know we're going to go a little long here, but let me wade into something that is probably crazy. This whole thing of the passion. Um, when the movie came out by Mel Gibson, Passion of the Christ,
Right.
I did not go see it, nor have I seen it. Does that mean that I personally do not believe in the events regarding the person of Yeshua? No, that doesn't mean it at all. I refuse to go see that because of the Catholic influence and what I know regarding history of the passion plays of the past, and just what you mentioned of Christians, and this is historic. This is, you can go, it does not take much effort to find this historically, that people would go to these passion plays and then go out and murder Jews.
Yeah.
I went to Israel just after The Passion came out, that movie, The Passion, came out. And I can't remember how many Jews I had asked me, well, you saw that movie? I said, no, I didn't. And they looked at me like, what do you mean? Why? I said, I believe in the events that movie might have tried to portray that are in the Gospels, but I do not believe in the backing of it and where some of those events have come from. And I know the anti-Semitism that passion plays have brought forth in the past.
Right.
And it was quite a conversation that led into. You know, I've
Yeah.
said to many people that have talked to me regarding Pinocchio, that it's amazing that you have this appreciation of reading the Gospels and the person of Yeshua and all of these things. And it still amazes me that you're able to do this, especially with your personality, by the way, without something exploding. Because literally, I know enough of your past. We've talked in depth that you learn how to fight on the streets of New York because
Yeah.
of people that would come up to you and say you're the one that killed Jesus and try to beat the daylights out of you. This
Yeah.
has been, I don't know that people can really understand the place that you've come from to where you are.
You know, I would say what a long, strange trip it's been, but someone may have said that before me. I don't know why that sounds familiar. What's interesting is, as I continue to gain an appreciation for the messages and the teachings of Yeshua, it creates more and more resentment against those who claim to be his disciples,
Wow.
who have distorted and seem incapable of understanding the most basic of points that Yeshua taught. That's something I've mentioned that to you before, and I know it generated a good chuckle from you and Kathy, that here's Hanoch, being resentful, for those who can't grasp Yeshua. It's kind of weird.
Okay, so that's where it makes sense now, Hanok, is how you said that when you study the Besorah, the Gospels, you have the same, let me call it, righteous indignation regarding the people that have misinterpreted those words as I do.
It's a very sweet way of describing that, righteous indignation.
Okay.
And considering that this is a family-oriented show, I think we should just stick with that terminology. Absolutely.
All right. Well, hey, we're coming up to out of time, and want to wish you Chag Sameach as you enter into this season, and
a joyous Pesach. Enjoy. It's the time of renewal. It's the time of our redemption, and may we all get with the program. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
there you go. And if Elijah shows up at my door, I'll see you soon.
Sure enough.
Okay. Take care.
Take care, Mike.